The Revolt of 1857. The mighty uprising of 1857 was the first great and direct threat to the British rule in India, which shook the very foundation of the British Empire. It was for the first time that so many Indian rulers came together to fight with the common enemy, that is, British, to oust them from the country. The greater part of the country, whether directly or indirectly, was involved in the defiance of British authority. British historians are of the opinion that it was a mutiny of sepoys or the Indian soldiers of lower rank in English army, because the whole of India did not participate in it. South India, Bengal and Punjab were only marginally affected. The early Indian historians are of the view that it was indeed the first war of Indian independence. The coming together of soldiers from different regions and rulers of different principles and participation of different sections of society for the common aim of overthrowing the British government was unprecedented in Indian history. It possessed a national philosophy and represented a national outlook in context of those days. In principle, it represented a desire for the freedom in every form. The causes of revolt. The revolt was caused by the cumulative effect of the discontent that was brewing up in the minds of the people. The different reasons responsible for the revolt of 1857 can be described under these heads. Political causes. The indiscriminate annexation of Indian states through subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse created mistrust, suspicion and fear among the princes. The Mughals felt humiliated as Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar was informed that his successors would not be regarded as king and would have to abandon their historic home at Red Fort. Trivia. Lord Dalhousie's Doctrine of Lapse stated that the kingdom of an Indian ruler who is not survived by a natural male heir will pass on under British control. The annexation of Awadh on the plea of maladministration created panic, as Nawab of Awadh had been the most loyal and submissive ruler of his time. Hindus were enraged as Nana Sahib was denied his pension and forced to live in Kanpur away from his home state. The annexation of Indian states resulted in large-scale unemployment as its ministers, courtiers, officers and soldiers lost their jobs and found no avenues for re-employment under the new dispensation. Economic causes. The peasants were oppressed by the new land revenue system that made excessive demands to them. They were dispossessed of their land in case of failure of payment. Due to high duties imposed on cotton and silk, the producers stopped the manufacture of these goods. Many craftsmen and artisans lost the royal patronage after the annexation of princely states and became impoverished. The ruination of handicraft industry led to too much pressure on land. The high posts in civil services, army and the judiciary were reserved for the British, and even the educated Indians were not given any high posts or given better salaries. Socio-religious reasons. People felt threatened by the activities of Christian missionaries who tried to convert people and made public attacks on Hinduism and Islam. The government seemed to be supporting them as well. The interference of the British in the age-old customs of sati, polygamy, child marriage, etc. antagonized the orthodox section of the society. Legislations against sati, support for widow remarriage and other such measures were looked upon as interference in the lives of the people. The introduction of English education, encouraging women's education, introduction of railway and telegraph were viewed with suspicion that British wanted to use these for spreading Christianity. Lands belonging to temples and mosques were taxed, which not only hurt the religious sentiments but also deprived the families dependent on these lands for their income. Military causes. Indian sepoys were forbidden to wear caste and sectarian marks such as tilak and beard or turban. The General Service Enlistment Act in 1856 required every Indian soldier to serve overseas. Many sepoys believed that overseas travel would lead to loss of caste. The sepoys were often humiliated by their British seniors. The Indian soldiers were paid less and could not rise above the rank of Subedar. Their foreign service allowance was discontinued just before the revolt, causing a deduction in salary. The inequality in the sanction of rations, pay structure, and living conditions between the British and Indian soldiers in the barracks caused a lot of dissatisfaction. Trivia: the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 was not only a revolt of soldiers, but it represented Indians' anger against British injustice and cruelty. The revolt was the statement of mass desire to be independent of British rule. Immediate cause: in 1856, the army introduced a new rifle, the Enfield rifle, which had a greased paper wrapper around the cartridge. The sepoy had to bite off the paper to load it into the rifle. The rumor that the new cartridges were greased with the fats of cows and pigs created an offensive feeling among the Hindus and Muslims. Hindus worshipped cows and Muslims detested pigs. They refused to use the new rifles as they hurt the religious sentiments of both the communities. Many historians also believe in this story and feel it was a deliberate move to hurt the Indian sentiments. Some historians, however, believe that these were only rumors. By the time the British woke up to the damage done by it, they were too late. The outbreak of revolt. The first stirring of the revolt was marked at Barakpur in Bengal in March 1857, where Mangal Pandey, an Indian sepoy, openly shot down the British officer of the regiment. He was executed for this act and the regiment was disbanded. The incident caused an open mutiny at Barakpur in Bengal and was spread to other places. Many Indians were convicted and sentenced for long periods of imprisonment on refusal to use greased cartridges. Then in May 1857, the actual revolt broke out at Meerut. Some Indian soldiers were taken into custody for refusing to use greased cartridges. Angered by this, other soldiers killed British officers, burnt down their houses and released the prisoners. Trivia: the sergeant who was shot dead by Mangal Pandey was Major Hudson. The British soldiers stationed there could not resist them. From Meerut, the Indian soldiers marched to Delhi, where they were joined by the Delhi soldiers. They proclaimed the restoration of Mughal rule and placed Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar on the throne. Once the news about Delhi uprising reached other parts of northern India, the soldiers of these areas also revolted against the British. They rose up in arms in central India, Kanpur, Lucknow, Rohilkhand, Banaras and parts of Bihar. Delhi. It was the morning of 11th May when the sepoys of Meerut crossed Yamuna and marched to the Red Fort. Bahadur Shah Zafar had suddenly become the rallying point for all those who had decided to put an end to the British rule. The rebels killed many British officers and captured the city. The revolt was actually led by General Bakht Khan. However, the troops under Bakht Khan held on for 4 months before the British crushed the rebellion. Delhi was taken after fierce fighting and Bahadur Shah and his 2 sons were captured and taken prisoners. He was exiled to Rangoon and his 2 sons were shot dead. Awadh. The revolt was led by brave and resourceful Begum Hazrat Mahal with the support of sepoys, peasants, chiefs and taluktars. The British forces were forced to take shelter in the Residency building. The siege continued for 8 long months. British fought the battle under Henry Lawrence. Though many British soldiers, women and children died every day inside the Residency from wounds and epidemic, still they held on. Henry Lawrence himself died in this battle. Despite great courage and determination shown by Indian troops, British were able to release besieged troops and Lucknow was reoccupied by British in March 1858. Kanpur. The revolt was led by Nana Sahib, the adopted son of Peshwa, who captured Kanpur and declared himself the Peshwa. He was assisted by Tantia Tope, who was constantly urging everyone to come together. He held on to Kanpur for quite some time. The British fought back with vengeance and Indians were blown to pieces by cannons. Nana Sahib escaped to Nepal. Trivia: the Government of India celebrated the year 2007 as the 150th anniversary of India's first war of independence. Jhansi: one of the greatest leaders of the revolt was Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi. When she found that the victory against British was not possible, she fled with the rebels to join Tantia Tope in Kalpi. Together, they put up a good fight. She died fighting the British troops on 17th June 1858. The commander of the British Army referred to her as the best and the bravest military leader of the rebels. Tantia Tope carried a guerrilla warfare for some time before he was hanged to death after trial. Bihar. The major organizer of the revolt in Bihar was an old man, Kunwar Singh. He mobilized the forces there and defeated British at many places. Later, he joined forces with Nana Sahib and died bravely fighting with energy. Suppression of the revolt. The strategy of the British from the beginning was to limit the revolt. The Nizam of Hyderabad, the Begum of Bhopal and the King of Nepal came forward to help the British. Delhi was soon recovered under the generalship of General Nicholson. The Governor-General had to mobilize all his forces and place them under the command of his best commanders. They burnt down the villages and massacred people. They also resorted to public hangings and even blow people off at the mouth of the cannons. Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tantia Tope, Kunwar Singh, Bucks Khan all died in the battlefield, while Nana Sahib and Begum Hazrat Mahal escaped to Nepal. By the end of 1859, the British restored their rule and order. For them, it was as good as reconquest of India. Causes of the failure of revolt. Though the revolutionaries fought heroically, they did not have a unified command and were unable to organize a unified front. The whole of India did not join the uprising. Large parts of the western and southern India remained unaffected. The Sikhs, the Gorkhas and the Rajputs remained loyal to the British and even helped them actively. The upper class, the modern educated class and the estate class were critical of rebels, fearing that the success of revolt would revert India to backwardness. Lack of modern weapons and equipment was also a factor for the failure. The British Army was well equipped and trained. Poor organization and lack of coordination also contributed to their defeat, as they did not know what should replace the British institutions. Effects of the revolt. The long period of misrule by East India Company came to an end, and the administration was taken over by the British Crown. Queen Victoria was proclaimed as the Empress of India. The Board of Control and Board of Directors were replaced by the Secretary of State for Indian Affairs. The rule of the Mughals and Peshwas came to an end. The Governor-General was given the title of Viceroy and was subordinated to the Secretary of State. The Queen's Proclamation of 1858 assured Indian princes that there would be no more annexation of territories. Their rights of adoption were also accepted. According to this proclamation, more educated Indians got the chance to associate themselves with the administration of the country. The need of cooperation with the Indians was fully realized. The army was reorganized to prevent further revolts. The proclamation also granted general pardon to all except those found guilty of murdering the British. After the suppression of the revolt of 1857, armed rising against the British continued. It broke out in different parts of the country. The Wahhabi movement, the Kuka movement, and tribal revolts broke out, but all of them were ultimately crushed. These movements represented the demands not only of a section, community, or region, but the entire nation, and it united the Indians into one entity as nothing else had been done before. The revolt of 1857 was one of the major landmarks in the history of India. The heroic struggle served as a constant source of inspiration. Indians' perception of themselves and their country was to change the history of India forever. Trivia: Mangal Pandey's treachery had made him quite infamous among the British, so much so that a new English word, Pandey, was born in English language, which has been derived from his surname, and it means traitor. Although it was quite colloquial in those days, it has slowly become obsolete.